When people talk about retirement and think about retirement, and you may hear this in your own work, they tend to think about the 10 years after retirement. They don't like to think about
All right, I'm excited to chat with Ken from the Longevity Project about a series that he's doing on his podcast called Century Lives called The Retirement Ladder. First, tell us about the Longevity Project and what that exactly is, Ken.
Yeah. First, thanks for having me, Roger. The Longevity Project was created with the Stanford Center on Longevity about 4 or 5 years ago to foster greater public understanding about the benefits and opportunities and also the challenges of longer life. I think as backdrop, life expectancy in the U.S. has more or less doubled over the last 150 years, but a lot of the way we think about life hasn't changed that much. And what we've kind of done is take those extra years of life, kind of stuffed them into old age. Our mission is really to sort of rethink that and to think about how do we have longer, more healthier and more productive lives, really starting at birth.
And these are serious thinkers that you bring together for these discussions about more on a societal level. How do we start building safety nets and planning for society, right?
Yeah, so we hold an annual conference at Stanford called the Century Summit that we try to bring leading thinkers from around the world. And we use our podcast called Century Lives as another opportunity to think about the broader social implications of longer life and really how do we get more people to have those longer, healthier lives.
And so a series that you're running in January pivots a little bit different, right? Because it's actually profiling individuals that are living their journey towards retirement and aging and longevity. So it's called the Retirement Ladder. One, why are you profiling non-industry people or thinkers on this subject? And why are you profiling people that are just talking about their own individual journey?
Yeah. So we have a podcast. It's called Century Lives. We launched it a year and a half ago from Stanford. And it tries each season, this will be in our 5th season in January, tries to take on some larger issue and tries to explicate it in some interesting way. So we've tried to take on everything from longer careers to why some people get the gift of longer life and why others don't, and try to tell those in an interesting way. We wanted to get into, and some of the stories, really begin with at birth or even before birth with maternal health. But we wanted to talk about what happens in retirement. We know there are a lot of great podcasts already dispensing financial advice or talking to experts. We wanted to approach it a different way, which was the story of individuals and their lives, their aspirations, their goals, and how they're planning for that retirement that might last 5 years or might last 35 years.
I think that's a really important bridge because especially when you're dealing from a societal level, you don't think of a person, you think of people and constituencies, forgetting that each individual person makes up the societal, right? Everybody's going to live their own thread in their own unique way. And that can get lost sometimes in macro discussions about these topics, I think.
Yeah.
So it totally makes sense.
Yeah. So what we wanted to do, Roger, was find an interesting way to tell some stories. And so what we did was we went to one place, Harris Health, which is the largest public health system in the state of Texas, Harris County, which includes Houston. And they run 2 major hospitals, and we went and interviewed or doing episodes about 8 different people who work there, everyone from the CEO, who's actually a fascinating character himself, to a security guard, and try to get their different, 8 different views of what retirement should look like from people who are joined together by a common employer, but often divided by very different financial resources or personal situations.
Yeah, they're each living their own thread. I mean, but they're on the exact same journey. So what's the span of, give me some perspectives that differ from individual to individual on what they think about retirement.
Yeah. So here I'll mention just a few. I want to start with Tasha, who's a security guard, was a cop before she became a security guard at the hospital. She's looking forward to retirement in 10 years when she's going to open up a roller skating rink. It's been her lifelong dream. She's got she's a single mother with 3 boys. She wants them to bring them into a business and build something that's a combination of personal passion and intergenerational wealth. So she's a very sort of specific story, and she wakes up every day thinking about that. There's Carrie, who's a nurse, an ICU nurse, who wants to retire at age 57 like her father. She's 39 now. And that's her vision, is really what happened in generations before.
So is her vision really tied to that date? 57 is important to her for whatever reason?
Yeah, that's her father retired at 57. That's sort of her sense of the good life. And there's like Jeannie and Burgess, who are a married couple. She's a nurse. He's a carpenter at LBJ Hospital. They have 5 kids. 4 of them adopted. 3 of them already gone from the house. 2 of them adopted more recently from the NICU. So those kids began sort of behind the starting line, and have sort of long-term physical and, at least in one case, emotional challenges. And they may never be they may never launch. So they're thinking about retirement in the context of what's it like to be older and still have responsibility for supporting children.
Yeah, not just children, but children with some special needs, potentially, right?
That's right. Children who are now adults who have special needs and may not be able to support themselves. Very different views. And the other three episodes, 4 other people, 3 other episodes, are also very distinct stories.
It's amazing how that really presents challenges from a policy or even, my industry perspective of there is no one size fits all, because everybody is so different. I mean, the couple you talk about, that's a whole different journey of service outside of just retirement and the beachfront and all that, all that brochure stuff.
They're interesting because they're the only ones we talk to actually have pensions. So the Harris Health used to have a pension. They both long-term employees. And yet, even though they sort of have that golden pension that we think of as the top of the line, they're the ones who probably work closest to the economic edge because of their own specific family situation.
Yeah. I'm excited to listen to all these different profiles. I think it's very instructive to bring it down to the human level. Were there any insights from the interviewing these people? Because you're the one that interacted with these, right? So are there any particular insights that you'll take back to the next conference that you have with the people that are thinking on the macro side of longevity and aging?
Yeah, I think so. There are a number of them. One is, I think you already touched on, which is every person has a different view of what retirement is. And that's a systemic challenge, right? When you try to think of a system that supports people with very different needs and very different goals. Another thing that sort of struck me was when people talk about retirement and think about retirement, and you may hear this in your own work, they tend to think about the 10 years after retirement. They don't like to think about, it's very difficult, I think, for people to think beyond that event horizon. And some of these people, if you're 60, you're 60 in the US, you have a life expectancy of at least 25, and people don't really want to think that far ahead. That's a challenge. And the other thing I'll mention very briefly is there was a generational divide in how people reacted to it. And not the generational divide I thought it would be. The younger they were, the more likely they were to have a very traditional view of retirement, at least in this small cohort. The closer they were retirement, the more they were thinking about purpose, giving back, what they're, if you want to put it this way, what's going to be on their tombstone, their legacy. And that was a very different outcome than, Carrie or Brendan, who were, in their 30s or 20s.
Yeah, it makes me think of David Brooks' book, The Second Mountain, which basically makes that argument. If you think the first mountain is, financial independence, you got a lot of obligations when you're younger. Yeah. All right. And then as you get older, you start to think about different things. And I think rightfully so. Both are important always, but it makes sense. That's interesting you're right. People think about that first 10 years. They don't really want to think about, I'm so excited about being 80 to 90, that decade. That doesn't seem to be, that's probably more frightening than it is exciting.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think it's hard. First, it's hard to think forward. Now I'm just going to,
conceptually,
project. Yeah. I'll be talk about myself. And it's hard. And it's also a little scary, right? The end years are often some of the hardest. But planning for them, of course, may make them a lot easier.
Well, I'm excited to share the podcast Century Lives, as well as the Retirement Ladder series. We'll have links to it below if you're watching the video. We'll also have links in our 6-Shot Saturday email, so we can hear 8 different profiles of people, real people thinking about retirement and what their views are. I think there's a lot of wisdom there. Thanks so much, Ken.
Roger, thanks for having me.